Chair Cayetano, the meeting is now live.
Thank you. Alice Mario, do you mind reading the public notice for us? Sorry, I figured it's you this time.
Public notice to access the meeting remotely, join from PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device, you can use the following URL, which is located on the agenda. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on rename. To rename yourself, be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter your meeting ID 890-0783-8093. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press star 9 and wait to be recognized.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm suffering from a little bit of a cold right now. So, fair warning. Not really a cold, it's more like, nasal drip. Okay. I want to acknowledge our Atlantic acknowledgement in the packet. It's on page 3. And with that, let's go to agenda item number 1.
Okay, this meeting was called to order at 6:33 p.m. I'm not proceeding roll call. Chair Cayetano.
Here.
Vice Chair Wilson informed us that she's running late. Board Member Wells. Currently absent. Board Member Bozo Charcot submitted a leave of absence. Board Member Nash. Here. Board Member Allen. Here. And Board Member Pemba.
Here.
Chair, we have a quorum at the moment. We would need the 4 votes to take action.
Okay, great.
And on behalf of the ODPA, we have Director Lee, Investigator Weinberg, our data analyst Saeed Nabi, and myself, Policy Analyst Domingo. On behalf of BPD, we have Deputy Chief Dave and Sergeant Egbert joining us here in person. With that, Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. So I want to, point of privilege to recognize Board Member Temple. Welcome. Usually you've been sworn in, I assume, right?
Oh, I have.
Okay, great. We usually give a couple minutes or a moment for you to, if you have any words you want to share with the board or the public, you're welcome to do so.
Sure. Well, it's thrilling, exciting, a little nervous to be here. A lot of reading for tonight, and looking forward to participating in this. I've been a Berkeley resident for the last 36 years. Yeah, 36 years. Previously worked for the City of Berkeley, and one of those roles included the PRC back many years ago. And much has changed, and I look forward to learning about how everything is now and participating to the best of my ability.
We're glad to have you. Thank you for being here. Okay, with that, let's go to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda. I get a motion to approve unless someone has a concern.
So moved.
And a second, I'll second it.
Are there any objections to the motion? Seeing or hearing or not hearing any, the motion is approved.
Great, let's go to agenda item 3, which is public comment.
Thank you, Chair. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but maybe allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board's jurisdiction at this time, except confidential personnel matters. With that said, we'll start with those physically present before moving on to our virtual attendees. And one moment while I get the timer up on the screen. Turn on that. Okay, 3 minutes.
Kit Saginaw is my name. I'm appreciative of the work that the PAB did in slowing down the rush to via flock technology. That was helpful. I'm disappointed, as I suspect some of you are, that it looks as if it's merely slowing down and not a real rethinking of the direction that the city wants to go in. And I appreciate the work that I'm sure you will continue to engage in to help us get sane and actual safe policing in the city. Thank you.
You. Okay.
Hi, my name is Jason Martins, Berkeley resident. I also want to speak in appreciation of the PAB support and the flock research that was done for the last city council vote. I also encourage the PAB to continue to oppose any kind of surveillance technology that I feel is really not helpful for the citizens of Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no additional speakers or person, move on for our virtual attendees. Kelly Hammerton, you've been granted permission to speak. 3 minutes from the screen.
Thank you, and I also want to thank the PAB for all the great work that you did on the flock and surveillance, and I know that that's on the agenda today, and I'm hoping that you won't get your comments won't get shut out in this rush to get something approved. And so again, just thank you very much for your tremendous work. I really appreciate it. That's it.
Thank you. Any additional speakers on Zoom? Chair, we have no additional speakers at this time.
Yeah, thank you for everyone physically present and online, and for those people who gave public comment. Let's go now to agenda item 4, which is approval of the minutes for the special meeting June 3, 2026. Can I get a motion unless there's any comments? So I will second it.
Are there any objections to the motion to approve the minutes? Great, seeing or hearing none, the motion is approved.
Okay, great. And with that, we will go to agenda item 5, which is the auditor staff report. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have anything new to report. I've been very busy supporting the board in its work, specifically on the supports policy for the chair, as an evaluator for the RFP process for the surveillance technology. All the items that you see in your agenda today, agenda packet, the annual report, the police report, the MOU preventing and participating in the negotiations for the interim regulations as part of the internal stakeholders team. And then overseeing the investigation. So all that and keeping me pretty busy.
Great. Would you accept questions from board members, if they have any?
Sure.
Any questions from board members or directors? None? Okay, just one question. So there's usually, like in the past years, there's been a Juneteenth participation by ODPA. Is that happening this year?
No.
Okay, is there still like some sort of event in South Berkeley happening?
You know, I'm not even sure.
Okay.
I haven't been paying attention. I know usually there is.
Yeah.
It usually would probably be on Sunday.
Okay.
Our participation this year it's mostly constrained by staff.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, I should say, city offices are closed on Friday. Juneteenth.
Yes. Thank you for the flag. Okay. If there's no other questions or comments, let's go to agenda item 6, which is the chair and board member reports. I do not have a report out for this meeting. Are there any board members that would like to share something? No? Okay. We're zooming here. We have a long agenda, so I think it's a good thing. Let's go now to the chief of police report. I believe Deputy Chief Tate is here. Hi, welcome.
Thank you.
Second
Appreciate it.
time seeing you.
I know. First, I'd like to start by saying welcome to Board Member DeTemple, or should I say welcome back. Look forward to working with you in the future. I will say that I have seen a plan for Juneteenth floating around, so I heard that question, and I do believe that there's something happening in the South for I think around Ashby Bart, where it normally is for Juneteenth. That being said, I just wanted to start out with touching on a case of interest. So as everyone likely heard over the weekend, our officers got called to the 1900 block of Ashby for reports of a shooting. There was a young woman who sustained a gunshot wound, who flagged our officers down. Officers figured out that the person was known to her and had fled nearby toward Ashby Bart. And ultimately, the fire department responded and took the victim to the hospital, where she still remains in stable condition. So of note to that, it is the second injury shooting that we've had in the city this year. We didn't have any injury shootings last year, so it is obviously deeply concerning to us as an organization, and we recognize that anything involving gun violence is emotionally challenging for the community, and also has a significant impact on our personnel, as well as the fire department personnel who respond and treat the victims and investigate the incident. So we are closely monitoring both of these events that happened and are committed to addressing gun violence and supporting the affected community members. Shifting gears to staffing, we do have a recruit graduating the Sacramento Police Academy tomorrow, which is exciting for us. This will bring us to 4 officers currently in the field training program. We also have 8 recruits attending the academy right now, with another 4 slated to start in the next coming months. Happy to say that right now I have staff down in the marina hosting a physical agility info night. So rather it's called an info night, but they're giving them sort of a deep dive into what the physical requirements are to pass the test in order to move forward in our process and answer any questions, and sort of give them an introduction to what the academy might look like and any other areas of the department that they might be interested in. So they're out there. Hopefully we'll have a successful night. A couple other things of interest today: Chief Lewis and Deputy City Manager Dave White met with Vice Chair Wilson, and their meeting was to address questions regarding our proposed budget and sharing that, as many of you already know, the City Council will begin budget deliberations at Tuesday's meeting. Our public safety technology RFP process is moving forward. So far, we do have input from Vice Chair Wilson and Board Member Board Member Nash, as well as Director Lee. So thank you very much, and we're looking forward to working to incorporate the input where appropriate. Today, Captain Okies and I, as Chair Cayetano just mentioned, met today with Director Lee, as well as the City Attorney's Office to continue our use of force policy discussions. I will say, Chair Cayetano, I just fired off an email to you regarding the use of force statistics that you were looking for, so hopefully we can chat more about that next week. We are committed to continuing to work together and try to align areas of any areas where we have some disagreements or departures in how we're viewing things. We anticipate bringing our proposed policy changes to full council September 15th, which I don't know if you guys talked about that at your last meeting, but was a change in what our timeline was. So we're committed to that work. Also wanted to call attention to, I had shared that we were bringing an ordinance amendment for BMC 2.04.190, which is the annual reporting requirement for the MOU compendium. That was something that we had discussed last year, as trying to make that an every 3-year requirement. And while you guys have it in your packet, sort of hot off the press, I learned from the city clerk's office that this ordinance is not subject to amendment because it was voter approved in April of 1973. So we have a lot of work to do to make any changes to that. So it's not something that we can just take to council and have them change. So just letting you know that we will be standing down on that. We have pulled that item. And we're gonna work on, I guess the voter approval process is a multi-step, multi-departmental process with a ballot measure that has to be drafted and all those things. So we will not be doing that this year. We missed that. So that will not be going to council on the 7th as anticipated. And then lastly, I just wanted to share that today we put out an invitation for National Night Out. So registration is open for all the neighborhood events and participants can see the event locations. There's an interactive virtual map. So as in previous years, we plan on attending the city-sponsored block party at McGee Baptist Church, along with other community gatherings throughout the city, and look forward to seeing everyone out there. And that's all I have.
Thanks. Would you take some questions? You have a few minutes.
I have a few minutes, yeah.
Okay, great. Are there any questions for the team? Yeah.
What is the date for National Night Out?
Ooh, I knew you'd ask me that. Let me, here you go.
August 4th, W2.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a few questions. So first, in relation to the shooting, so that happened this weekend. I actually live a few blocks from there, so I just wanted to make sure that the information is out in the public. So the person is still at large, is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
But both the shootings that happened in Berkeley recently, the victims were known to the suspect.
Right.
They both, okay.
Yep.
So they're not, okay, that's helpful to know. I have the second one, Vice Chair Wilson is not here right now, so I'll ask the question for her. We had talked about what materials in one of our meetings, what materials would go to the council related to the RFP. And after we talked internally, one thing we would like to see, and if you're open to it, is to have the RFP itself as it's drafted, included in the submission to council. So you mentioned at one of our meetings that the cover, like just the cover sheet is included. I know this is like kind of abnormal, but I don't think that otherwise that the RFP itself would be publicly available. I don't know when it would be publicly available if it's not included in the council packet.
Are you talking about for the 30th?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would need to also get with finance and just do a little bit of research to see if that's something that is feasible. And I can take that and get back to you.
Okay, but there's no other time when it would be publicly available, right? The RFP itself. I know that you're sharing it with us.
Just when we launch it.
Yeah, when you launch it, right? It'll be published when you submit it, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Those were the questions that I had. So thanks for being here. Appreciate it. No other questions? Okay. Great.
All right. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
Okay, let's go to subcommittee reports.
Okay. That should go straight to liaisons, just because the board members on the subcommittee currently aren't here. Are there any reports from any of the liaison work?
Maybe just for the benefit of, or you could read out the committee, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Metrics and operations, that's Vice Chair Wilson, Board Member Wells.
Yeah.
They're absent. Outreach and engagement, Board Member Wells and Board Member Bozo. And policies and practices is Board Member Wells and Vice Chair Wilson.
The policies and practices that can.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I think maybe not this meeting, but the next meeting, there will be an opportunity for the committee shuffling, I would say. We have here, gratefully, 3 relatively new board members, and I think that if you have questions, I think it would be helpful, actually, maybe Director, if you can submit a short statement of what the subcommittee does and circulate that to all the board members. And that would be helpful, I think, for everyone. And then at the next meeting, we can discuss how people can get plugged in if they're interested. Okay, great. And then, so, and also, Maria, you were talking about the liaisons, who are the liaisons right now?
It's yourself, for EIS updates, and Vice Chair Wilson on the regs.
And then also me for the use of force, right?
Yes, also for use of force.
Is there a regulation update, Director Lee?
We're very close. We may need to be going to council. I can't say anything other than that in session.
Okay,
We may be going to council in closed session, so that's one. Stay with me.
sure. Okay, and then on the use of force policy, the deputy chief Tate mentioned it, but we actually have met more than just today since we've last met together. We met twice last week. And I have followed up with this board's request to look into what sustained findings from the IAB, and that might impact our review of the policy. And they told us, and it's true, that a lot of the findings, a lot of the cases that are brought to the IAB are ones that we also have as well. So when a complaint is submitted to us, it's also submitted to the IAB, but there's not complete overlap. Because someone can submit one to the IAB, or I believe the IAB can also, the department can initiate their own investigation. I believe that's right. That's right, right?
Yes, we can initiate it, through.
Right. And so I asked for, a list of cases of sustained incidents where we did not have a parallel complaint. And so that's one bucket of data that I'm looking for. The second bucket of information that I've requested is the use of force information from 2016 to 2021. And that will help, put into context the data that we have for since the new policy was implemented in 2021. They informed me that the 2016 to 2021 data will not be the same. It's not really apples and apples because the reporting and collection process changed with the new use of force policy in 2021. So you can't really compare the statistics from before and after. We actually now collect, there are more reportable uses of force in 2016 than there were in 2021 than there were in 2016 and 2017, et cetera. But I still think it's helpful to know, and just from a general perspective, and what the numbers are, and also how the reporting changed for everyone's awareness. The third bucket of things that I've asked for related to this review is there's a vendor who helps write our policies, Lexipol, and they supply daily training bulletins to different jurisdictions that subscribe to them. And I asked for the daily training bulletins related to the use of force policy so that we can review them. And then the deputy chief and Captain Oki's, basically told me that there are a couple of them, but they're not like a big part of what the training is that the department does. It's like they're like sheets of paper that can be filled out within 5 minutes. They're like scenario-based sheets of paper that sort of supplement the main use of force training that we do. So there's a lot of outstanding items that we're still discussing, and we're really close to getting through a lot of the discussions on the substance of the policy. And now it's really up to me to bring a recommendation that synthesizes all the information, and so that we can try to find it where we have common ground, honestly. So that process is taking time, and initially the department was talking about bringing it in July, and honestly, the timing of our meetings, we've been working a lot, but there's just a lot to get through. So I asked them to move it to September, and that's where we're at now. So we have more time as a board, and you can expect to become very familiar with the use of force policy in the next 2 months. That is my update on the use of force policy. Okay, anything else on subcommittees?
That's all.
Great. Let's go now to 9A. I believe we have a panelist for this section. Do you want to introduce?
Sure.
All right,
She
Ken.
gets on.
Yeah.
I can.
Go ahead.
Hi, Lauren. This is Lauren Gerson Green. She's the recruiter for the permanent director of police accountability. And the firm is WVCP Inc., based in Portland. You may be aware that there have already been a couple sessions, a community session for meeting members to express what they would like to see, the qualities they would like to see in in the director and there was a council session last week. And so Ms. Gerson Green is going to carry you through a similar exercise to get your feedback and help inform the process of selecting your next director of police accountability.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Over to you, Lauren.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Chair Cayetano, and thank you, Director Lee. So I'm Lauren, and I'm excited to meet you all. As Kathy mentioned, I have been working with a subcommittee of the City Council in the early stages of recruiting for the new permanent Director of Police Accountability for the city. And as part of that process, there's a robust engagement that we like to do with internal and external stakeholders to try to just make sure that everyone is heard and that we have a really robust understanding of the role. And as very critical stakeholders in this process, I would love to hear from you, the members of the Police Accountability Board, as to what you're looking for in a candidate for the director position that will work so closely with and support you in your work. So I believe in the agenda packet we had I kept it very short and broad because I'm just looking to hear your thoughts and not sort of steer you too much. And so I just have a few questions for you to consider and would love to hear from you all on what are the things that come to mind in response to these questions. So the first one is, it's really around what you're looking for in candidates, but the first question is really, what do you believe to be the most critical priorities for the new director stepping into this role to focus on in their first, let's say 12 to 18 months, because these are long-term things, but secondly, what would you identify as the biggest challenges and areas of opportunity for a candidate stepping into the role? Sometimes something is both a challenge and an opportunity. And then what are the technical competencies that you see as most important, and what are the interpersonal competencies you see as most important? So technical would include, are there particular backgrounds or particular types of experience that you feel you would really want to see in candidates? Are there particular interpersonal traits or leadership competencies or a particular type of leadership style or communication style that you think would be really beneficial to make someone successful in this role? So I'd love to hear from all of you. And my plan is just to sort of go round robin a little bit. And Chair Cayetano, maybe I can rely on you it's hard for me to see everybody in the room on camera, so maybe I can rely on you to help me with that. See who has thoughts to share.
Sounds good. We can be as organized as we can be. So maybe you want to start with the first question?
Yes. And I also don't mind going through so actually, are you able to see if I share something on screen? Will that be easy for you all to see? I can share the document on screen with the questions. And then the way I did this with council that worked pretty well actually is just each person can address, can give me their thoughts to all of the questions at one time. Any of the questions that you have thoughts you want to share. So I'll get this on screen. That may make it easier.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but is anyone interested in going first and discussing these? We're on page 16 of the packet. Would you like to go, Vice Chair? here's the other questions.
Yeah. I guess I would say, I don't think I'm gonna answer the questions, sort of in a unique fashion, but I just give a general kind of stream of consciousness about the role. Love to hear Kathy's thoughts as well. But I think that the position requires somebody that's really comfortable in a variety of lanes and who is able to be both forceful and confident and driven, and yet able to forge the requisite relationships to advance the work. And I think that's very difficult, and probably particularly in this community. So what I would say in terms of, you know, your recruitment and interviewing folks is I think that the candidate needs to understand the environment that they're walking into, honestly. And that includes, you know, a very different composition of the city council than the one that moved to create this new board. And certainly there's been many times I've been in this role that I have not felt that we have the supportive council, or they're particularly interested in what we have to say. And I think that is something that our old director felt, and I think our new director, whoever is brought into the role, may feel. And it's important that you get a candidate that can deal with that capably. And like I said, it's a balance between asserting yourself, demonstrating your competency so that people do have to listen to you, but also being able to forge relationships so that you can move forward. So I think, you know, that's what I would say, that is certainly both a challenge and an opportunity, but it's more about the nature of the person and them understanding the environment here that they're coming into.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that.
You haven't thought about the critical priorities question or no?
I don't know. I mean, I do think there's an ongoing question about workload. And there is a question about the role of the board vis-a-vis the director and the director's staff, and how much we rely on the staff to support this board, and does the staff actually staff the board? And I do think that's going to be important for the person that comes in to really wrestle with, and have both staff and the board have clarity around that, because the workload overall is pretty significant, both for staff and for us as a board. And it's not feasible, I don't feel, for us to do our work well without relying on staff, and yet there is not the clarity. In fact, I do not think the structure is that the staff actually staff the board. So I think that's an area that the new director will have to focus on, relationship building, as I mentioned, and demonstrating competency and excellence in the work. I think that shows up in many ways, including being timely with all of our various deadlines and work products, and having them be very high quality. And so that's a priority, in the sense that you have to work backwards from there and figure out what kind of structure you need to put in place to get there.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm hearing not just a strong relationship builder, but also a strong administrator.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead, Board Member
Um, to board member Wilson's point, whoever's coming into this job is coming into an extremely complicated situation. The city council is divided on some of the issues facing the board and the city. And the divisions are deep, and some of them are quite personal. And navigating that is going to be extremely difficult. It's going to require a lot of diplomacy, and a lot of building some kind of relationship of trust and respect for the director and this board. And then there's been the very public and impassioned discussions on surveillance equipment, which is, if you can judge by the public meetings and the council meetings, has upset a significant portion of the population in this town, which is always willing to make its opinion known loudly and often. So how that is handled and how the relationship between the department, the board, and the council, in my opinion, has to be repaired. Is going to be a real challenge for a new director.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Mauer. Hi, Lauren. I don't know if you had anything to add, Lauren, on that.
Oh,
or-
I'm sorry. I missed that. I had trouble hearing you. No, that's fantastic. I appreciate that, that point. That's consistent. A lot of this is really, which is encouraging. This is what you hope for. This is really consistent with a lot of what I've heard from our engagement efforts so far. And the issue of the surveillance, that issue has come up. And I think, one thing that we'll be looking for is a candidate that has some understanding and experience of how those sort of rapidly evolving technologies are influencing police policy and procedure, and how to sort of navigate those issues, not just from a policy and a procedure perspective, but also from the community concern perspective. So that's helpful that you brought that up. Thank you.
Board Member Nash, do you have any comments or?
Yeah, I don't know that I can add anything that would be really helpful in terms of technical qualifications. I'm still new to the board, but I know for me, what was really helpful when I was onboarding a few weeks ago was just being readily available to answer questions and, get me up to speed. So someone who is interested in that being a primary, thrust of their role, supporting board members, I think would be really useful. And yeah, perhaps someone who is already familiar with issues ongoing in Berkeley. I actually would be interested to know what candidates are applying to these roles and who's standing out. Do they have experience as, police accountability directors, or are they from the city? So those are just some free flowing thoughts I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak to candidates specifically at this stage, but I can, like, to the makeup of like what candidates are applying. I can tell you, I can speak to it a little bit generally. I can tell you that from all the engagement we've done so far and from our work with council, we definitely are looking for folks that have prior experience in civilian law enforcement oversight, and are very, familiar with this work, both at a strategic level and on the ground, who understand and have investigatory experience, who have policy experience. So our ideal candidate is definitely going to bring all of those things to the table. And we are, one thing, I can talk a little bit about this at the end too. I'll sort of tell you like where we're at in the recruitment process and what other engagement has been done so far in a little more detail. But one thing that we do very well at my firm is we are very active in sourcing candidates. This is a national recruitment. And so we are, we're just about a couple of weeks into the open period for applications. We'll be open for another couple of weeks at least. And we'll be open for a week plus minimum. And throughout the entire period, we're actively sourcing candidates directly through LinkedIn, through individual phone calls, through emails, and through our networks from recruiting for like positions in the past. The nice thing about this field in particular is there's a very strong professional network for this work. And so we are actively looking to bring in candidates that have really strong experience in this work specifically. That is the goal. And I'm optimistic about that, very much so.
Thank you. Board Member Temple, do you have any thoughts?
I guess, I think it's a very difficult position. There's a lot of things that it's not. It's not an advocacy position. It's not a bureaucratic position. It's not a flag catcher position where, you know, there's a variety of interests, you know, throwing stuff at you and you simply, your job is to manage all as well as you can. It's a position that reflects a problematic reality, which is the police have a problematic job. They deal with problems in our city. Those problems are painful to look at sometimes. And they're difficult to deal with. There's lots of issues going, there's lots of interests, there's lots of issues, there's lots of points of view. The role requires somebody who's able to keep their head screwed on properly and tight in the face of all of those conflicting currents, and not simply mediate amongst those pressures and currents. So it requires some maturity. And we look for somebody who's shown that in the past.
Thank you.
Lauren, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I'm happy to keep going unless you do.
No, that's fantastic. I appreciate that perspective. I noticed I joined earlier in the meeting and I was eavesdropping on the proceedings and heard that you were part of the PRC in its earlier iteration. And I'm interested to hear if there's anything from your time participating in that work that you feel is important for me to understand, like anything that you think is relevant from what you saw and what worked and what didn't.
I have lots of thoughts. None of them come to mind in a succinct form right at the moment.
We'll be able to send you written feedback as well, or if we come up with things later in the process.
Yes, I believe so. I need to, barring any Brown Act concerns, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it wouldn't get circulated to us. It would just be, if there's a line that we can submit it to, then just let us know. Okay, Director Lee, speaking of PRC experience, I think that's a great segue.
Oh, I have actually met individually with Lauren, as has Mr. Murillo.
Okay, so you don't want to, okay, sounds good. I have, a few. Well, first we'll have maybe like 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes at the end of this for questions, right? We'll have a few minutes at the end of this for questions from the board if needed.
Yes, absolutely.
But okay, great. So I have a few things. Some of them are, I don't want to repeat what other people have said. I do agree with what other people have said about, navigating different interest groups, navigating like difficulty within between institutions. And I echo this. I think that some things that haven't been mentioned, just to emphasize them, I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned in what I've heard, because I listened to the community meeting as well. I think that it's important for the director to be a good writer. I think that a lot of what, a lot of the work product that they create, whether it comes to complaint findings, whether it comes to recommendations to the board or recommendations to council, writing is how that, the majority of how that is communicated. And So I think that's important. The second thing that I think would be important in terms of qualities, I think some familiarity with the law is really important. I think that there are a lot of, they don't necessarily have to be a trained attorney, but there's just a lot of conflicting, maybe like not conflicting, complex, legal principles, and also confidentiality questions, certification questions, a lot of evolving law in this area right now. That to me seems to be very, very relevant, and it comes across when we're, making recommendations to council, but also making findings on different complaints. I think that the person also has to be, not has to be, it would be great if the person is a good spokesperson. I mean, the person will be speaking in front of the council, representing the board in many circumstances. So I think the maturity that board member DeTemple talks about, and the composure, is important. And I think what I would like to see is really a willingness to engage the community. I did appreciate that about, former Director Aguilar. He was really involved in trying to find ways to be out in the community, and there's different ways to engage with the community, but maintaining lines of communication with different interest groups or institutions, Berkeley High, the college, different community groups, historic community groups in the area. I think that's critical priorities. Yeah, I mean, I think, and then, everyone has that good relationship building. I think that's important. I think equally important, if not more important from my perspective, is a commitment to independent police oversight. And I think that, there are times when the independence is challenged. We've been pressured a lot, I would say, by people within the city to forego our independence in certain circumstances. And I think that there needs to be a recognition that this board and the directors as a person, like as a role, is an institution, and it's an institution that was created by the voters to be independent, and that institution, as we see across the country, can be eroded by people who do not care to uphold those principles. So I think it's important that the person has a commitment to a type of independence that is not abrasive, but is actually like performs the functions of the role properly. So that, I would say, like, that to me is, I would say, above everything else, the most important quality.
Absolutely. Okay. Commitment to independence. Absolutely. Okay. I appreciate that. In terms of like functional priorities, I know that you're working on some issues with the use of force policy right now, it sounds like. I know that the permanent regulations are going through a process and hopefully to be completed soon. Are there other things that are coming up that and can publicly discuss that you'll be working on that you think will be functional priorities for this body and for the director who steps into the role?
I want to open up to other board. That's an interesting question. I would say that, body worn camera is another thing that, well, let me broaden out the category actually. There's a lot of changes to technology, not just in how it's being used with the public, but also within departments itself and how that impacts the way that oversight is done. I would say that, attentiveness to that in itself, and even efficiencies that can be gained is really would be helpful, so that we can stay on the cutting edge of that. And also, accountability has to go hand in hand with any sort of technological updates or progress when it comes to like reporting, collecting data, things like that. So that to me is something that I think is on the horizon pretty quickly. And I know that the department is thinking about ways to update what they're doing to make things more efficient on their end. Do other board members have a comment, question about?
I just would echo the technology piece. I say that AI and policing is coming, it's, here in many ways. But I think when I say technology, you mentioned board member Alan mentioned all the surveillance technology. And so I think we're really at the beginning of broad-based implementation and figuring out what the role will be of the board in overseeing or responding to the technology as it's deployed is going to be really important.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
I'm concerned about, to me, the only way the department can function effectively in the city is if it has the trust of people in the city. And I'm concerned about the effect on the department and that relationship with people in the city by the technology debate. I think that technology has a critical role to play in policing. But what that role is and how it's going to be used here in Berkeley has gotten lost in a discussion that has created suspicion and fear and concern in the city. And frankly, that's undermining the ability of the department to do its job. And it puts this board in a very complicated position vis-a-vis that, the department and the city. And I go back to the council, which is not a unified body and has got some very deep divisions on this issue. And it places this board in a very sensitive position. And we have to be seen as an independent body that represents the interests of the people in the city. So I don't know what I'm telling you, except that I think we're in a very complex and sensitive and difficult period. And I'm concerned about the direction in which things are going.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have one thing that just came to mind. I didn't think I was gonna mention this, but because in terms of the investigation process and everything else that they're charged with, it differs significantly from what I did back when I was PRC officer. In that, back then, you know, sustained, not sustained, exonerated, whatever, that was it. This job comes with disciplinary recommendations. And that's interesting. I haven't really seen how that plays out. I haven't seen any thought about it. I haven't seen discussions. But given that, and having been a manager in many situations, given that, it wouldn't hurt for this person to have had some supervisory experience in their life.
Mhm.
Because disciplinary recommendations are tied to things like what's the purpose of them and that kind of stuff, as opposed to simply the black box evidence goes in and sustained or not sustained comes out. So
Absolutely.
that's just kind of I mean, I don't know how to say that. I mean, it's just a little brain game that came about. So I don't know how to say it any more articulately than that, but that would not hurt somebody at all in that role.
Okay.
And Laura, we only have 3 minutes left. Do you have 3 minutes for questions, if possible? Or do you want to summarize? I don't know. How you want to conclude in the last 3 minutes?
Well, I'm sorry. I think I might have misheard the first part of what you said. Did you want to do some questions from anyone who's got them? Is that?
Yeah, just like for a couple minutes, and then maybe you can just tell us where we're going after this.
Yep,
Are there any
absolutely.
questions? Okay, sounds like no questions. I just wanted to give a second in case people had any, but if you could just summarize where we're going in the timeline, that'd be helpful too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to just, as part of that, really briefly, just touch a little bit more on where we've been in the process as well. I know we said this was part of a robust engagement process. As most of you probably know, that also included an open community meeting that was a hybrid virtual and in-person event at the end of May, where we opened things up for the community to come and share their thoughts. I also attended the council meeting on June 9th and did an open engagement session with council that allowed for public comment as well, to get council's thoughts, kind of similar to the exercise we're doing here today. And then I had one-on-one stakeholder meetings with some internal and external folks. That includes some former members of the PAB. That includes some members of city administration that would be working closely with this person. And so that has been and we did a community survey as well, an online anonymous survey that we ran and collected responses for about 3 weeks, a little over 3 weeks, to allow folks that additional opportunity to weigh in as well. And the themes from the community meeting, as well as the themes from the survey and the results from the survey, will be published on the city's website independently of each other, because the survey results won't be ready soon enough to publish together, but those will both appear on the city's website for the public when they are ready. And the community meeting, that is in the process of making its way to city channels now. So that's the engagement process. From here, we will continue taking applications for a little while longer, as I mentioned, and then I do a pre-screening process with candidates, and then the subcommittee of council that I'm working with, which includes the mayor, as well as Councilmember Humbert and Councilmember Lunapara, will be advancing candidates to the first round of interviews, which will include both the subcommittee themselves will be involved in those interviews, as well as a community panel. So that will include some members of the community nominated by the council members. It will also hopefully include a subcommittee of this body. And so we're looking for a couple of members and I know we have one volunteer already, so thank you. But we're looking for a couple of members to participate with us in those interviews. And so finalists who advance from those interviews would interview with the full council in closed session. And from there, hopefully, the idea will be to select a candidate and move forward and appoint them. So any questions about the process, where we go from here?
Sounds like no questions on this end. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody's time. I know this made your meeting this evening longer, and I really appreciate your willingness to chat with me. And I hope to be working with a couple of you on the interview process as well. So thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you for all your time with us tonight.
Absolutely. And Chair Cayetano, I'll be in touch for next steps regarding the subcommittee.
Amazing.
Thank
Good.
you.
With that, let's go to discussion and action 9B regarding the 2025 PAB Output Annual Report. Director Lee, did you want to introduce this item?
Sure, this version of the report incorporates feedback that we received from board members at the last meeting. And I don't know what else to say.
It's okay. So last time, in terms of the feedback for the process, we'll go like comments from board members, or we'll go with questions from board members, and then maybe comments at the same time or afterwards. Anyone is welcome to take the floor, but this is the annual report for 2025. And I am trying to get it across the finish line by next meeting. So we have at least this round. We had last round of feedback. We have this round of feedback, and then at the next meeting, ideally everything is ready to go, besides a few maybe minor changes to the report itself. So that's the
Sure, yes, because this is going to be presented to council at a special meeting on Tuesday, July 14th, or And the clerk actually told me. The clerk said for that meeting that they needed materials by the Monday before, which I think is the 6th, and so. I said, well, we're meeting on the 8th to finalize it, so. We have until sometime on the next day on the 9th, so we really do hope that it's in almost final shape by the next time we bring it before, and the next meeting is in. 8.
Thank you for implementing our feedback. Any board members have comments on this report? It's a lot of work that went into it, so thank you for that. Those,
Thank you. Yeah.
your awful office, yeah.
Credit, I should give credit to staff because, as you know, I was not here last year, so. Was really relying on them for really for big.
I have a lot of comments, because I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Yes.
So I don't know how you wanna.
You're welcome to go, you're welcome to go first.
Okay, so I'm gonna, just go through my kind of comment. And then a broader question that I have. The first is on page 22. We say there's 43 complaints submitted by 27 unique complainants. And then in the tables in figure 1, we talk about 378 allegations. Are those 378 allegations associated with the 43 complaints? That's a question.
Yes.
Okay, I think that should be made clear in the text in the paragraph above. There's 43 complaints mentioned and then later the 378 allegations, but I think just saying 43 complaints reflecting 378 allegations would make that cleaner. More substantively, I think this figure 1, focusing on the decrease in complaints between 24 and 25. I mean, it's not a great focal point. So I think that I would either remove it or add an image that reflects the increase in the number of unique complainants. Because it's just focusing on the sort of negative metric, not the more positive one. The section that follows figure 1 on timing of when complaints are submitted, as a question, I would ask anyone, staff or anyone else, why we think this is relevant, because I feel like this section kind of feels like filler that we can take out. Not the part that case processing in 2025 includes cases from 2024, but this thing about like, do you get complaints in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third? I'm not seeing that as value added. I'll just keep going because I don't know the best way to respond to all of these. In the investigative outcomes, we start talking about 230 allegations asserted. So I'm a little bit confused by the difference between the 378 or the 338 in figure 1 and the 230 that are referenced now in investigative outcomes. And then I'll say that in figure 3, I don't know if these numbers are supposed to total to 230. I don't think that they do. So maybe I'll just pause here and say, what's the 230?
Yeah, so in terms of the 230, I figured it was gonna be, or I'll just take a step back. The 378 are the number of allegations we received from the moment the complainant gives us the. So this takes into account complainants that checked off every single box in the complaint form. And that staff has to sit down with them and essentially narrow down what the actual allegations are. Which is that 230 number. The 230 is actually what ended up being formally noticed to BPD.
Okay. So I think maybe we can, that should be clarified. I don't know if that means that 378 is what was in all of the complaints that were filed, and 230 is what were in the complaints that we investigated.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that could be made more clear. Is the figure 3 supposed to total 230? Cause I don't think it does. And if it doesn't, then I think we should, say why.
And I will verify.
Okay. On page 27, so this issue about our rate of the agreement or not with the department, this is a big issue that's come up in both of the years that I worked on the annual report in terms of our own metrics as a board. We played around with having the department actually sustain some of our allegations, be a performance metric. And so I just felt like this focus, again, in figure 6 and in the narrative above, is a little bit off because yes, there's a 27.54% overall agreement rate, but that comes from agreeing with us on unfounded, exonerated. It's stated in the text, but I think what is improperly de-emphasized is the 0% agreement rate on sustained. It's something we've brought up and really hit on, I think, in the last 2 annual reports. And I would just argue that it's really important. And I think it's especially important in this particular report because if I understand the BPD complaint data that's presented in the following section, it looks like BPD itself, so for complaints that are coming through its own internal affairs, that they're sustaining a significantly higher percentage of those. Is that correct? Is that what you guys saw as well? My read of that data?
Or
For BPD, so it says like BPD received 58 personnel complaints and of the total complaints received, 15 were sustained. So they sustained 0 of ours and 15 of 58 of theirs. I just think that's interesting. So I guess my main point is that figure on figure 6, I think in your circle, you should not have overall agreement rate, but if you have that, you also need to have the agreement rate for sustained allegations highlighted because that's what we've tried to make several years in a row. In the BPD complaints section, I just have a question at the top of page 28. Of the 42 external complaints received by BPD, 33 were received through the ODPA. Just remind me what that means.
yeah, so this is speaking to when we receive a complaint form and we notice BPD, BPD's internal affairs starts a parallel investigation. Which is essentially what's being referenced to there.
Okay. Okay. And what does this sentence mean? Of the 42 external complaints, 33 were received through the ODPA and 42 through the Internal Affairs Bureau. So there were 42 external complaints, 33 were received through the ODPA and 42 through IAB.
I think that's locked over to.
Yeah, that's
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't know, were you guys struck by their much higher sustain range?
So I was, but I was waiting to comment on it until but we should talk about this section. I think it's better to go section by section.
Okay.
So we can go from, this is the complaint section, we can talk about it. Go ahead.
Well, I've been struck by the fact that we give complaints to IAB, but they don't give any to us. And I think that fact should be noted in here. If you're gonna talk about the disparity sustaining.
In terms of process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a really interesting point, actually, because we don't see them, so we don't know. Like, we can't assess for ourselves if there's merit to the fact that they're sustaining a lot more complaints that come through them than come through us. Like, most of those are coming internal complaints, so it's police staff, I'm assuming, complaining about each other.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that maybe that they're gonna be upheld more, but we don't have any visibility into them, so we can't even learn from it to help inform our own work.
I have, I mean, I agree with you. I think some of the issues I think with the section is that there's not really conclusions, there's data. And that's fine. I think the data is helpful. But I think we're getting toward a conclusion here. One of them is what Vice Chair Wilson is talking about, which is that 14 of 16 internal complaints by IAB were sustained and 0 complaints were sustained where the PAB sustained them. That to me is a statistic that is completely buried in this summary and is actually not even in a text anywhere. I don't think. And so I find that significant for the same reasons that the vice chair and maybe even board member Allen were pointing to. So I would like to see that broken out into a sub bullet or a paragraph in some way. Going back to what Vice Chair Wilson was saying about the numbers, I agree with her about just taking out this decrease statistic. I think the decrease statistic is also like misleading because it's not true that every complaint that you receive results in the same amount of work. And so I think that workload is really the statistic you're really going for here, and that's not a helpful statistic. The decrease is not helpful to the amount of work that is going into individual complaints. So I would highlight that. I would prefer that you go with the number that you actually investigate as opposed to the number that are listed. I mean, like total allegation. Yeah. It's okay to put it in a footnote, maybe like the number of things that when people are like marking allegation boxes, like I imagine that they're just kind of like, marking boxes, and you are the ones who are determining in the first instance which one have enough merit to be investigated, or at least are actually like making out some sort of case. And so I honestly would just like drop the 378 number to a footnote and keep the other number that we were talking about earlier. And going again, I don't know why, I agree with Vice Chair Wilson that we've been coming back to this number, and I don't think it's we're getting closer and closer, but we're not really there with this section on the overall agreement rate. I don't think the overall agreement rate matters at all. What matters is the way that it is broken out when we have it broken out here on the figure on the right. So I think if I'm listing conclusions to draw, that would be the second conclusion is 0% agreement rate when it comes to sustain, a high agreement rate when it comes to essentially everything except not sustained. What I find interesting about not sustained is, and I think this director staff should inform us, I believe the reason why not sustained is a not preferred finding is because that actually stays on the record. That's right? Can I refer to Dan? Dan, can you?
Yeah, not sustained is a different category. It's like exonerated and unfounded go into the it's fine kind of thing. And then you always get sustained, and not sustained is a separate bucket that still stays with an officer on their record more than it was unfounded or exonerated.
What do you mean more than? Can you just explain that?
So it's still not sustained, right? It wouldn't be releasable if it was serious misconduct that was sustained. It wouldn't be publicly releasable necessarily. Someone else correct me on that if I'm wrong, but not sustained gets reported to post, which is the state certification board in a different way that it remains with them.
Okay.
For lack of a better word, and I don't know if the sergeant also have it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, all of our complaints are judged by a preponderance of the evidence standard, which is lower than clear and convincing, and which is lower than beyond a reasonable doubt. And the numbers themselves here are, I think, the fact that there is 7% for not sustained versus everything else, it's like it's saying that there's a slightly different standard being applied to not sustained versus unfounded and exonerated. There's like some sort of gravitational effect happening here. And it's for the reasons that I think that Dan just shared. So that's the second bullet. The third bullet that I would like to share is something that the council will, I think, focus on, which is that of the 200 and how many allegations? 230 allegations. We sustained 13. And I think, again, going to why data doesn't speak for itself, we have to be speaking into the data to explain my preference. And I think this is backed by my experience with what we actually do, is that this is reflective of our commitment to carefully analyzing the evidence and judging it closely to detect the policy and not, prejudging issues, not doing anything. There is something very judicious about what we do when we reach findings, such that the facts that there is a 0% agreement rate should be very surprising, because we in ourselves are being judicious when we sustain only 13 of 230. That we should be concerned that the department doesn't agree with any of them. So I think those 3 points in my mind are conclusions that should be drawn in some way. The data is helpful. The data should be speaking toward a certain directionality. That's my opinion of what direction we should be gesturing for. And so that I'll leave that to further discussion by board members. That's my feedback on that section. Are there any other comments on the section based on what we've heard so far?
No, or a second, footnote for the throw allegations totally, because it's not it's interesting, but it's not a meaningful number, It's worth noting why it's there, but it should not be the leading number.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Board Member Allen?
Well, I'm curious about what you said. If it's not sustained, but it stays on the officer's record.
Is there a question? You're asking Dan?
Daniel,
Sorry. There's a question about
so
what not sustained means.
if it's not sustained, but it stays on the officer's record. So this is similar to the state medical board. If you file a complaint against a doctor, it may or may not be upheld, but it's on his record and his insurance rate doubles no matter what happens. And it follows them everywhere.
So it might be similar, not sustained is saying that there wasn't evidence to say it did happen, and there wasn't evidence to say it didn't happen, or that it was proper. So it doesn't get discarded in the same way that unfounded or exonerated, but it just means that there wasn't enough evidence on either side to hit the preponderance of the evidence standard the chair mentioned.
Well, that's a very serious issue for an officer, isn't it?
Having a not sustained.
On his record.
I
Record.
can't speak to how serious it is. I think it depends probably, and how each department, goes through their personnel files, but I'm not sure exactly how serious every allegation or every finding is.
Do you have a comment about the report on that or no?
I think it's interesting, and it might be noted somewhere, because for people who file a complaint and it's not sustained, it may be of interest to them to know that that fact remains as part of the officer's personnel record. I don't think you have to make a big deal about it, but it's.
We can add a note, an explanatory note for why it might be the case. Okay. Any other comments on that section?
I would just say, again, we did kind of address these issues extensively in the last report, maybe the one before that, these issues being, the failure of the department to ever, support one of our sustained allegation or findings. And so I think it's important, if only for consistency, year over year, for us to continue to make that point, because nothing has changed, as we can see. Going on to policy, I really like the fact that we overview our policies and practices. We give like quite an overview of what we've been doing. I do think this section generally would be strengthened if maybe it wasn't replaced by, but augmented by a table or an infographic. That's sorry, I'm confused. Done. An infographic that illustrated in kind of succinctly the sheer number of policy issues that we took on, because you kind of get to it through reading a lot of text. In reality, very few people are actually gonna carefully read this report. So I think like a much better takeaway of the work, the diverse and intense workload associated with this section, I think it would be better reflected in an infographic or a visual. Then there's, I think it's a little bit odd that the end of the policy piece is on the policy subcommittees, which is really kind of a structural thing about how the board works. I know that we used to have in the opening of the annual report a brief explanation of process. I think it was like the investigative process. We described, it was like a little bit more of an operational overview. That seems to be gone, which I think is fine, but this policy subcommittees to me doesn't belong at the end of this section. It belongs much further up in the report in terms of how the board is structured and does its work. So with that, I would say if we're going to do that, then we might want to bring back an abbreviated narrative about how we do our investigative work as well, which we've already written in prior years.
Yeah, for that one, it would be, at least for the investigation process, we had a section in the previous version at the last meeting. We moved it to an appendix that we're still finalizing.
Okay.
But we could definitely include back a shorter version that gives an overview.
If, just because I think it's odd placement here at the end, to me. So that's it on the policy section, if you want to pause there before we go to the BPD data.
Sure, any comments? I want to move this along a little quicker because we're
Okay.
lingering, yeah, go ahead.
So page 39, there's just a comment below the sentence after the first paragraph starts with the purpose of this section is twofold. I'm not clear exactly what this section being referred to is. I don't know if it's the entirety of the BPD data section or what, but for me, it's a bit of an unclear.
Yeah, we'll clarify.
Okay.
This section.
So in general, with this data, I felt like, and here's where I want to get to a question. I felt like we were kind of going out of our way not to attribute, not to make negative inferences or to attribute any negative intent or to the department. I'm not being very articulate. We kind of went out of our way to say, well, even though the data said this, it's not necessarily an indication of disparity because of X, Y, and Z, like over and over and over again. And so it's like a huge pendulum swing from previous years of this report in terms of tone. I know that one of my questions I had asked the interim director was to what extent we met with the department to address all of the issues that council raised with this report last year, particularly around the data and the desire for us to align our metrics. So I didn't see that referenced here. I'd love just a brief description of whether or not this data in this section now entirely matches what is in the BPD annual report, that there's no longer gonna be that concern. All of our bias tests that we are having in this report now, the same as what BPD did. Jose, I think you're probably the best person to answer this, yeah.
So I guess the overhead version of this aligns it with the BPD's report. Part of my conversations with Arlo, and these were sporadic and formal conversations throughout the last few months. As we discussed their report and our report, is not so much that there's per se an agreement as to like what specifically needs to be in one report, but that both of our analysis in a way are incomplete. So with the purpose of this report and the way that it's structured, it takes into account the factors that the BPD analyzes it, but it brings it up to a different level, considering more layers, I guess is a way to put it, of the analysis that they presented in addition to what was included in our report last year. So it unifies the analysis into one narrative. With that said, I think a lot of the influence also came from the California Post and their report as to how they take into account the stop data and the test for bias, particularly with their stop data. It's a little bit hard to do it for this section because we're trying to condense it into a 50-page report when the California Post does. Their section on this is over 70 pages. So it's really like narrowing it down to what we think is the most. So I guess the short version of how I would describe this section is more of it's building off of the analysis and addressing the issues and the questions that came up in the council's meeting as to why use this metric over this metric. For example, we're trying to think of the one that comes to mind more specifically. The population-based assessment was something, well, because it was the emphasis of our report last year, that council members had a lot of questions on. That's something that we still include, but then we talked a little bit more about the influencing of the other factors as to why it may or may not make a difference. So it's really more, I guess, acknowledging we didn't really draft it for a conclusion. It was more of going beyond the script of statistics and acknowledging the various factors that influence the stop.
Okay, because this was a big issue when we presented last year, I think at a minimum, this section should include something, I guess it could even be in a footnote, that describes briefly the issues that were raised last year. As I recall, there was a lot of concern about the veil of darkness, the tests that we were using versus what the department used. The department's conclusion in its own report that there was not any kind of disparity to be concerned about, and our very different conclusion. And so, and then in this footnote, maybe describe the work that was done with the department to lead up to this report, and basically what you just said to me. I think that would be helpful. I will say that there is still a lot of disparity. And I think this version of the report goes too far in hedging it over and over and over again. Because even when you look at stop data for residents only, among Berkeley residents, white individuals represented 37.5% of stops and blacks 35%. That's a huge disparity. I think blacks are 12% of the population or 9%.
7%.
7%. So I mean, I feel like we are, even where it's extremely obvious in your face, we're kind of hemming and hawing about it this time around. And the other place where I was really struck was in the pedestrian stop data, which also continues to be these huge disparities. And this is something that we brought up in the FIP report that we submitted in 2025. So I have a question here for figure 13, how the data compares to what we submitted in the FIP report. I think that would be very helpful to bring into this annual report. So I think the bottom line is we aren't making any progress at all, not from anything I've seen. So if that is important, then you can't keep doing the same thing and expect to get different results. I don't know whoever said that, but it's true. So if it's important, then we should be doing something different. If it's not, then I think council should say they don't care about it anymore. But and then on page I don't know what page this is, the homeless 48. Just as a quick question, the table 3 I don't know if these percentages in the blue and the green are supposed to add to 100. They seem like they should. So that's just not the percentages below in the table, which do add to 100, but in the little boxes where it says proceed to housed and unhoused.
If they're supposed to add up to.
Yeah,
We usually, and I think I might have just cut it off because I was cleaning up. We have a little note that we essentially round for some of these figures. So they might not add up to, it's just missing that disclaimer.
no, but it says 29.4% of total stops, people are perceived as housed, and 20.6% they're perceived as
It should be, it
unhoused.
should be 79.4.
Okay, yeah, because like, if you're not housed and you're not unhoused, what are you? That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, that's all. I've already made my comment about hemming and hawing. I feel like we're doing that again. And this finding suggests that disparities in homelessness are contributing factors influencing aggregate racial statistics. We don't really know, so I just. Yeah, I think we're giving the department a lot of outs here, so I would kind of wanna just provide the data. I'm getting to the end. Challenges encountered 2025. I don't think you mentioned anywhere in here the board vacancies. Talk about staff.
What page are you on?
I'm moving to the end. 62 of the packet, I believe. 43 of the report, 62 of the packet. There's staffing and resource constraints. I don't see anything about the board. And then my last comment, I promise, is on priorities. I just briefly looked at February of this year. I submitted a summary of our planning session discussion. It was agendized for this board. It included the priorities that we had identified. I don't think it matches this. It's not that it has things totally different, but they're not all here. I just don't know where this came from.
Yeah, part of it was reviewing the meeting notes and that documentation, but we'll take another look to make sure. Everything that's supposed to be in the zoning.
Okay. So we also had a lot of discussion about challenges in 2025 that I don't see fully in here either. So that's just a good resource document, and for our own like maturity as an organization and how we function, I do think like if we already put something forward, we made it public, then we shouldn't like reinvent the wheel with this. So that's it.
Here.
I warned you guys.
No, it's good.
Okay.
Are there any comments on the stop data suggestions?
Yeah. Did a lot of work on stop and release data and analysis thereof a long time ago for the city, and I mean, one is, I think geographic breakdowns are helpful and matching those against cultural service, because that way you get to see something about how they might track stuff happening. Secondly, if you really want to see a disparity, throw in gender. Because you will see a staggering number of men being stopped compared to women. But the other thing is, I was actually shocked by the low number of stops compared to many years ago. But this may be very difficult to do, but I know in the stop and release stuff that I did, the stop and release situation is one where there's a strong arm robberies, somebody gets punched, the person's stolen, gives a description of cops go look for somebody, call goes out with a description, they stop somebody, victim comes around, stop him, and they'll cut person loose. In those situations, the identity given by the victim is critical to who gets stopped in those situations. And it is definitely, the numbers came back rather disproportionate. I wonder if there's any way to do. These stops are primarily not driven by that type of incident, so there may be no way to know what exactly is driving them. But I think being sensitive to the issue that has been raised is one of the ways to dig more deeply into it, to actually figure out, it's not just about lowering numbers here or there, it's about figuring out why certain numbers happen, so. That's my, and I don't know exactly how to do that in this context, but I haven't done it a bit, and I'm not familiar with this thing.
Yeah, a lot of it is collecting limitations, so if they're not collecting that, or it's not reflected in their stop data. I don't know if it requires that.
I think,
Go ahead.
I'll confirm this, but just from my media recollection, the stop data does talk about the source of the call, or like the reason for the initial stop. So that in itself shouldn't be, not to have additional words myself, but I think if that's something that we want to see about the source or like the primary reason for the stop, it shouldn't be too much of a lift for us to include it in there. As well as the geographic data, I think we had a Google report, I'm not sure where.
Remember the FIP report, there's this very exhaustive analysis of stop data, pedestrian and vehicle. I mean, I think trying to do an updated analysis and getting this done on time is probably not feasible, but I think referencing the FIP report data and maybe even doing a little bit of comparison would be possible and interesting.
Yes.
And in that FIP report, we do some of the additional work that board member DuTemple is talking about. And remember, the fair and impartial policing recommendations and all of that related activity were intended to result in changes in these numbers, and they haven't. And there were a whole host of things that were supposed to be implemented that were going to result in reductions in this disparity, and that has not occurred. So again, like basic accountability, we should be highlighting.
I want us to conclude in
I'm done.
5 minutes, just for the sake that we have such a long agenda today. I think for the sake of my comments on this section, I disagree with honestly the conclusion, overall assessment on 51. I don't think that I don't know how we can conclude. Well, I mean, so we can conclude that the policing activity interacts with different factors, but the fact that they interact with different factors doesn't explain the data that we're you know, that is included in here. For example, I mean, like, if you look at the unhoused population breakdown by race, it's, you know, it's similar to with when it's not broken down by race. So I'm not sure what we're actually saying with that. Very contrary to my other comment in the previous section on complaints, I think that this is an area where we can provide the data and let the council come to its own conclusion, sort of like what Vice Chair Wilson was saying, without making this, you know, grand statements about what it actually means. I think that the department, you know, has a perspective of what it means. I don't really think that there's a lot more for us to include beyond what, you know, what we've offered in terms of the actual data itself. That's sort of my preference, honestly, when it comes to this sort of stuff.
Just to clarify, so the proposal would eliminate that section, their overall assessment.
He thinks it's inaccurate.
Yeah, I mean, like, what broader analytical, what does this even mean? I mean, like, can you explain to me, like, did not identify strong by temporal enforcement? What does that mean? We're not driven primarily by, how can you say what it's primarily driven by based on the data that is in the section?
Yeah.
There's no indication of what's primary or what's not primary.
Right. I guess what the intent of this section is really just to state that there's a lot more factors that influence the stop data itself that may not be reflected in the numbers.
Right. So we can say that it could be impacted, but I don't know if have we done an assessment of like the way that commuter activity patterns are reflected or how they impact the stop data?
We did talk about commuters earlier, but again, I'd say like this is really a fraction. And I've always, one of the things even like with that factor, like these are reports that very much show several pages and certainly dive deeper. I would be the first person to say that this report doesn't really do justice to the broad topic of stop data analysis. Because you're right, there is different commuter patterns, and then you have to dive into the layers of who's commuting, why they're commuting, and so forth. So there's definitely a lot more layers here. So in terms of just tweaking, I guess, the overall assessment, I'm just trying to understand to what extent or in what way you would change the wording.
I have comments in mind associated with certain sentences that I would change, which I'll send to you guys soon. That might be helpful. I do agree, like, we didn't do a regression analysis, we didn't test for causation, so. And then, yeah, we're kind of going out of our way to say. Like it doesn't look like we're going out of our way to say all these contributing factors cause this disparity that we're seeing. But we didn't really test for that. So I think it's more than one place where that needs to be addressed. And maybe without thinking about it, one simple fix would be to take that overall assessment section out. But that's not the only place where those kind of statements are made.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. So in terms of a concrete recommendation, taking out any sort of conclusion about causation, I would be in favor of. I don't think that we've shown any sort of causation either way. In my opinion, I think we have helpful data, but we can leave the causation inferences to the council. Is that helpful? Yeah, go ahead. Last comment from board member Allen, we're gonna move on.
Yeah, my last comment is that you have to make a distinction between unhoused and everyone else, because it's fairly well established that given the economic disparities in employment, wages, and everything else in this country that have a long and toxic history, a greater number of African Americans are unhoused than anyone else. And so it's not surprising that you would have more African Americans stopped who are unhoused than you would have other people. Lifelong Medical Care did a survey for the city a few years ago about who the people were without housing. And that was one of the things that stood out in the survey as to who people were. I don't have any comments about people who are residents and housed. I'm not commenting on the racial disparity there. But the reason primarily for it among the unhoused doesn't have to do with the police department. It has to do with the economic structure of this country.
Thanks for around.
Sorry, Chair, I
Yeah.
have two really quick.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
In
last,
addition to the
the
substance.
last two.
Okay, so page 48 of the packet. 29 of the report, is it just my laptop or copy, or is the 29.4, that 4, it doesn't look like a 4. I don't know if it's,
Yeah, that's what we have.
Okay. okay, and then one page up, page 47. The figure on the left, the perceived housing, 79.4%. At the bottom of that graph,
Oh, yeah.
so I would either get rid of the percentages or shorten the bar. Those are my comments.
Okay, great. Thank you all. All right, we're gonna have to move on now to 9C, which is the discussion action regarding the Berkeley Police Department surveillance technology acquisition reports and use policies. probably what people are more interested in than our annual report and our discussion of and for community video streams and an investigative software platform. You know, I just want to flag that this memo that's in the item is actually Vice Chair Wilson's. And the memo was not drafted by me, it was drafted by Vice Chair Wilson. And so I don't know if there's a way to reflect that in any sort of minutes, but I just wanted to put that out there and then also to give it over to her to discuss what she submitted. If you would like to, or should I open with some timing things?
I think you should open with content setting and timing because it would be helpful for me.
Sure, I will,
Get
yeah.
reminded of where we're going.
Sure, okay, so rewind to a couple months ago, the department submitted a community video stream use policy to us on, I believe, on a Saturday. And we basically were not allowed to agendize it because of the Brown Acts. And so we only had one opportunity to review it. And so one meeting to review it. And so at that meeting, we were also discussing all the other surveillance, use policies, MSA, acquisition reports. There was a lot to discuss. And so as part of our feedback there, we basically gave feedback overall on the acquisition report. And we didn't really reach any sort of conclusion on the specifics of the use policy or the fact of the technology itself. And when we submitted it to the council, we sort of flagged that there were some steps that we thought the department needed to take and some changes that needed to be made to the acquisition report. Before even like going down this path of acquisition itself. So at the council meeting, they they severed the CVS, the community video stream item, and they sent that to the Public Safety Committee. At the Public Safety Committee, the department submitted a revised acquisition report that incorporated at least, you know, there's a memo on what they responded to in terms of our feedback on the acquisition report itself. And they also submitted a use policy. The use policy itself was identical to the one that they submitted to us. And the council at the committee at the June Public Safety Committee meeting had specific comments that I encouraged us also to listen to. I don't know if anyone was able to, but they had, you know, interesting comments about the scope of the use policy that I thought could also guide our discussion in some way. And then we had a meeting with different stakeholders, including the mayor, where we basically discussed how this use policy is not the final use policy that is going to be approved by council, which is a bit confusing. And I just wanted to clarify that. And, you know, me and the mayor and the director and the chief, we all agreed that the purpose of the use policy going before council is for the sole purpose of making sure that the RFP is concrete and on legally sound footing, because there is some, you know, question about whether there needs to be a use policy before going out to RFP for surveillance items. And so the department wanted to make sure that we had that. So when this item goes to council, it will be for the sole purpose of inclusion in the RFP. And then once a vendor is chosen, which we have, you know, liaisons here, at the conclusion of that RFP process, the department will, once they have selected their preferred vendor, they are going to go to the council, request approval for the vendor, and also submit a final use policy at that stage, at which point we will have another opportunity to weigh in. So this is kind of like an opportunity for us to discuss the technology itself, the use policy and the acquisition report, but there will be another opportunity in a few months after the RFP process. That is the basic history of where we're at right now, and a little longer because you know, some board members might need more context. So I think it's helpful.
Okay, so yeah, I was pretty confused by what was going on procedurally with the department. And so what I did here is I simply compared the updated policy and the acquisition report, well, it wasn't updated. the June 2nd supplemental submission of the department to the Public Safety Committee on community video streams with the issues that we had identified in our letter to council submitted in March. And so the way this agenda item is structured, I hope it's kind of easy to consume. It has kind of by issue exactly what we said in the March letter, and then what BTD has said in response in its most recent June submission, and then my assessment of that. I am not intending to go through all of these because I think that what's obvious is that a number of things were addressed, a number of things were not. And the question is, well, what do we do about it? As the chair just said, even though this has been submitted to public safety and is going to council, apparently there's the view that, you know, like it kind of doesn't matter because we're gonna have another opportunity to change it. I think that the issues that remain outstanding from our March letter should be flagged at some point. We could simply send this analysis that I've done to the department so they know, like, hey, FYI, for when you get around to redoing the policy, we could send it to council, we could do nothing with it. So, I mean, I'm happy to talk about specific issues, but as it's easy to see that there are responsive changes the department indicates that it's going to make, and then there are areas that are wholly unaddressed.
Thank you. I was going to submit a separate supplemental, but I didn't get to it, honestly. But I do want to flag for the board members that our agenda packet does not have 9C2. And so it was printed for the public and for our board. And it's, I believe, where is that at?
What is that? Is that our March letter?
No. So it is the department's acquisition report and the use policy, which are important pieces of this conversation.
It's the 2:30 council.
Oh, okay.
Containing those.
Yes, and so, I mean, for members of the public online, you can access this either on the Public Safety Committee's agenda for the June 2nd meeting or the upcoming June 30th council meeting for this item as well. That's what we're discussing.
So I don't think it was provided for June 2nd. No, because what we got for June 2nd was simply this memo with this narrative, you know, explanation of how they plan to address certain issues. So it was actually not a revised policy. So I've not ever reviewed their actual revised policy. I just reviewed their June 2nd submission.
So the on the agenda item for the Public Safety Committee, it was in their agenda.
The only thing I thought was, and I was given is a memo, but not even, it's I've never seen something like that coming from them in that format.
So they sent us an email with the memo, but in the actual agenda for the Public Safety Committee, which I have pulled up on my screen, it was included in the material.
Okay, I didn't look at it.
Yeah, I mean, nothing.
But assuming it's the same.
So it includes I missed one piece of the conversation from what happened at the March council meeting. The council also amended the department's proposed use policy. This is really confusing, I'm sorry. But the policy, which is on page 55 of this supplemental packet here, is what the red lines are what council approves tentatively at the March meeting, just so you flag that. There you go.
This is on drones. I'm talking about CBS.
It's included in here as well. I guess, no, you're right, maybe it wasn't.
Well, while you're looking that up, do you have a suggestion? I mean, I did this analysis. I don't know what to do with it. It seems like we can maybe send it forward as an FYI. for when they circle back around to it,
So the thing that was that was printed is not what I was asking, anyway. I do have a suggestion.
okay.
It's different from. And I want, I just want to like set the table so that other people can weigh in because there's a lot of background and history that goes into this and I want to open it up, but. My lean coming into this meeting was that the acquisition of the specific technology for community video streams has not been adequately demonstrated by the department in terms of like what they currently can access versus what they're proposing to access. And I think when this became like more clear to me was during the Public Safety Committee meeting. And so, I mean, like just to put the conclusion up front, I mean, I would prefer to recommend that they don't move forward with this technology. But I understand that we as a board have not fully like vetted that idea and that there might be an additional process that might be needed to reach that conclusion. So I understand that. I think just to preview why I think that's the case. Right now, the department has access to community video streams. And the way that they can access it is through providing a warrant to or requesting. So it's either warrant or requesting video footage from community members who have, Ring cameras or any sort of like stored footage in their front of their business, whatever. So they do have a legal narrower pathway to obtain the type of footage that they're interested in. The type of uses that the way that they would like to use this technology is not it would be you're able to tap into a video stream not just after the fact, so not just for investigative purposes, but also when there is an ongoing situation in order to monitor certain scenes so that it could provide real-time data. And I think that sort of level of surveillance tapping into community, like individual homeowners, business cameras in real time without notification, without any sort of like that level of surveillance is a way more dragnet type of surveillance than any sort of surveillance that they currently have access to. And when you ask about like the reasons why this type of surveillance is necessary, there's a, the reasons are very similar to the reasons for other purposes, for everything else that they're requesting. And so I was in favor of a limited use for drones, and I think that there are a lot of uses for the other types of cameras they have. I haven't seen really a clear justification for why this particular type of technology that is more in residential, more like more local, like more individualized across different communities is necessary besides the types of technology that they currently have access to, but they will likely have access to after this RFP process goes through. So that's sort of like my preference. I don't have like a full like pitch, a full like recommendation. I think that's where I'm leaning right now. I would be open to other people's thoughts as well about where we are in this process and their thoughts on the particular view.
So just to clarify, you would have the board take action tonight to recommend to council that they tell the department not to move forward with community video stream integration. Because I think
integration,
in addition to what you're saying, as I understand it, people can voluntarily now share their stream. I know I have a friend that did that, so you can do that now. It's not just as an email. You can give it over to the police.
You can register your camera with them.
And you can give it to them if an incident happens.
Correct.
Yeah.
But real-time access is not, as far as I know, right? Like,
But even with this, it's the choice of the homeowner or the business,
with what? Yes.
the CBS as
Yes.
proposed, okay.
Yes.
Were a lot of use cases presented to you in the meeting?
So we didn't have a meeting where we were presented with use cases. They presented certain use cases to the Public Safety Committee, and then they gave examples of that meeting. For example, they gave an example of a car crash when you want to be able to tap into a camera to observe the safety of intersections, or you know, some active event that is happening in a community where you want to be able to observe what is happening in terms of real-time access. And then also like I think the use cases for investigative purposes are also very similar to what the other use cases are for all the other types of things, right? Where there's an incident and you want to be able to query for certain things to understand in a certain specific area what happened in a particular view. I think another thing that I forgot to mention that they mentioned at this meeting was that one augmenting capability that they discussed was the ability to search terms. For example, red hoodie. You can search across, you know, all the registered cameras, red hoodie, and it will pull up in a specific time frame who people like. It'll use the software to be able to understand where people are located at certain times based on that query. So that's another 10 pieces of technology. So I think that just to, I mean, I guess like they recommending another reason is that the RFP process hasn't started yet. And so if this recommendation comes now, you're not wasting resources into that side of the process. So that's sort of in terms of the order of events, like that would be if we are going to make a recommendation, a reason to do that now. But it would be difficult to, I would say, craft a persuasive proposal to council if they disagree at this stage with given the information that we have in front of us right now. I recognize that.
So we're preparing for an RFP process, but we have the opportunity now to not even go down that road.
No, this would just pull out this particular component
Right.
of the RFP.
Okay.
There'd still be drones, there'd still be the automatic license plate readers, there'd still be fixed cameras.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this one I think is the lightning rod for people in this town. And it's a difficult issue. And no distinction really. I mean, the idea that you should have this system for residential, privately owned cameras as opposed to businesses is, I think, the key issue in terms of this surveillance system. My understanding, certainly from my neighbor who is a doorbell camera, is that if the police came to her door and asked for access to the footage for some reason, she'd give it to them.
So that avenue is allowed right now.
Yeah, and so I would be hesitant to have an establishment of this community video surveillance network for residential cameras, and I know it's voluntary. Okay. I don't think it's necessary, to be honest with you. Because the cost in terms of disruption in the relationship between the department and the residents is too high. And not worth the benefit that they would get from something like this, which is not, in my mind, that great, because they have access to it already. And if you push this down people's throats, you raise all kinds of suspicions and you undermine trust and respect in relationship with the department. And that's too high a cost for something that is such a low return. If you want to discuss it for businesses, that's another issue, and people would not have the same reaction or response to it.
But I think it's important to clarify, this is still voluntary.
I understand that, but
So
you
you're not
keep talking
pushing
about
things
it.
under you're not pushing something on somebody, you just sign up. And that you would want your whole camera to feed into the system.
I know it's voluntary, and you know it's voluntary, in the public conversation of this. people see this as an intrusion into their privacy and raise all kinds of questions about police surveillance of people. And you're not gonna get rid of that by saying, yes, but it's voluntary. It's voluntary now, so why do you need to do this? I mean, don't ask for something you don't need when the blowback creates a much bigger problem, in my opinion. I say again, the department has to have the trust of the community, and this undermines that for no good reason.
Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I mean, I got a couple questions. One is, it's unclear to me when this would be triggered. In other words, I understand the idea of live streaming, right? But I don't imagine somebody sitting there looking at a camera positioned above the entrance of Target on Saturday, 24/7, right? So somehow it's triggered by something. What did they discuss? What would trigger this?
So I can read to you their use policy.
Okay,
And it's broad. So that question was asked to the public safety committee as well.
okay.
And so they, it would be used for the following purposes: to support specific and active criminal investigations, to support serious traffic related investigations, to support police misconduct investigations, and then to respond and to review critical incidents or natural disasters. So to respond to and review critical incidents or natural
But none of
disasters.
that refers to live. I mean, none of those seems particularly relevant to live streaming.
The fourth one
Oh, yeah,
is, that's sort of like the broader.
because I can imagine a situation where you get a call, something's happening somewhere at a business, someplace, somebody's acting in such a way that the person reporting it believes that they're acting violently or something like that. It would be, frankly, if I was in a situation where I had the opportunity to have somebody review that, to see whether they were actually, waving an axe around or not, I would like to know that information. That'd be awesome. That's a live streaming incident, right? And it would inform somebody going to a call. I don't, so the idea of this is not Burgess CCTV, Big Brother watching you nonstop 24/7 kind of stuff, as I understand it. This is. I would really like to see more use case, frankly. I mean, I can imagine a lot of them in my head, but I'd like to hear, operationally, how would one imagine this to be used effectively? Second question I have really is, with regard to the RFP. You put something in an RFP, it does not mean you have to buy the package, the full package comes back. You can excise something, at some point. I mean, if you don't want it, you don't have to buy it, right? So I'm just saying, that's just something to book, the mentions of it. I feel very uninformed about this topic.
What I think it's important to think about in the context of this broader surveillance architecture that the department is planning for, which is what this RFP encompasses, because what they want to do with community video stream is have it feed into the same platform, the unified platform that your automatic license plate reader data is feeding into, your fixed camera is feeding into, and then your drones. And then you begin to see the surveillance architecture, because you begin to be able to track people all throughout the city, in their vehicles, not in their vehicles. And I think that's why when we talked about the recruitment for the position, a couple of times brought up technology and AI, like it is coming in law enforcement. You can really step back and think about the incredible efficiencies that would likely be gained, but at what cost? And that's the concern. What I would say about this item, Josh, the chair knows this, we fully, in my view, weighed in on CBS when we submitted our letter to council in March, and we did not say, we don't think you should go forward with this at all. We identified a host of issues. Now the department, albeit at the last minute, is trying to address some of those issues, and the analysis that I did suggests that there's still plenty more to be addressed. I think we're a little late in the game to now come and say, well, we don't think you should do this at all. However, I respect the chair and I know that you have a good handle on what's going on with council. So I'm willing to support that motion if that's what you want to make. If they decide to go forward with it anyway, I would like this analysis to go somewhere because these additional issues should be addressed. So if you want to make a motion that says we should say, no, let's stop it, I'll support it. And as a plan B, we have this analysis if it's needed.
Board Member Nash, do you have any?
No, I don't know.
I think, one thing that was Board Member Allen, raised was the possibility of limiting the, proposed uses to only business commercial areas. That to me seems interesting, honestly. To be, like you say, I have a good handle on what the council's doing. My handle suggests that they would never go for what we're about to recommend, just to be completely blunt. At this current stage, if we were to make that. Now, some people, I don't need to, people can decide where they fall in terms of the pragmatic recommendations versus principled ones. I think another interesting option for us to consider when we talk about is what it would mean to like limit this, the use policy to only business commercial areas as opposed to like residential, to allow residential to continue to be in the same system that it currently operates. I don't actually know the technical capability or feasibility of that, but maybe we can submit that into through the RFP process as well to explore that potentiality. That's sort of another area, an alternative path. But I mean, I think I generally understand where I stand, and I hear that, generally people agree with it, but I wanted to put that out there.
So your sense is that the council would support a community video surveillance system?
So I wouldn't put it that way. I would say that they wouldn't be willing to kill at the 30th meeting. That would be my guess.
I think it's up in the air.
I mean, yeah, it's quite possible.
And I think a suggestion that they focus on businesses, because you can make a good argument for that.
Sure.
A useful argument for the department, as well as one that does not infringe upon First Amendment rights and privacy and so forth. I think that would be well received.
Question on that is, so that's a policy position that council would take in terms of how video surveillance would be used.
Correct.
Rather than an RFP condition per se, other than the fact that the RFP would have to require the ability to segment off certain devices versus others.
Correct. Yeah, you're right.
So it's kind of like not so much an RFP question, it's a policy question. Floating around the RFP process, right?
What you said was right.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
So I'm not trying to backtrack on my recommendation. I just, if there are people who are more pragmatic and want to try to find a different recommendation, that would be an alternative one. But, Vice Chair, I agree with your assessments that are in this, report. So, and the plan C, B, whatever, I think it should be included in that.
Okay, well, why don't you make a motion?
Can we amend it, make your motion to change it to just commercial video surveillance?
As opposed to the threshold of not going forward at all.
Yeah.
So you would rather be commercial only versus the not go forward at all option?
I think that would pass, not going forward at all, the votes are not. It's uncertain. And I think that it would be well received by the council. And it would put the limits down, it would be well received.
You know,
Yes,
I thought in public safety committee, they talked about limiting it to businesses, but I don't see that kind of limitation in the policy.
I totally agree. It was raised. It was raised, but it's not in the policy. Okay, how do I structure a motion? I don't actually know.
We make the motion, we recommend to council that community video stream.
These only limited to commercial areas
Mhm.
and then also submit all these other concerns.
Yeah. Should the council choose to go forward in any manner with the community video stream acquisition or report or policies, here's comments we have on the department's June 2nd submission to public safety.
Okay, I'm gonna try to include the reasons in the motion so that we can all be on the same page about the reasons why it's going forward so that the recommendation can be made. So I'm gonna move to recommend that the council only authorize community video streams for commercial areas because of the board's conclusion that the risk privacy and the current ability of the department are great, and the ability of the department to access the necessary information is unchanged, and that the incremental benefit has not been shown. And then also to include in that motion the recommendations that are in the findings that are in the letter of Vice Chair Wilson that was submitted.
Okay, my second.
Okay, second.
Okay. Board Member Nash,
Yes.
Board Member Allen,
Yes.
Board Member Temple,
I'm going to abstain.
Vice Chair Wilson,
Yes.
and Chair Cayetano.
Yes.
All right, motion carried.
Okay, let's go to and move my speed here. Sorry, this agenda is so long. There's a lot of time sensitive things that we're having to address in this meeting. We try not to keep the agenda this long for every meeting, but we just have things that need to be addressed. Okay. So 9D is the MOU compendium and proposed revisions to the review schedule. We heard, excuse me, an update from Deputy Chief Tate, but Director, do you have anything? You wrote a memo?
Yes. And just as background, each year, the department is supposed to bring to the council all of its memorandum of understanding and agreements with other law enforcement agencies and private organizations. There actually was a lapse from 2018 until last year when they were brought forward. And there was a recommendation because it's so time intensive to, actually, this board did recommend last year to switch to a triennial schedule. And that is what the department did, but as we just heard from Deputy Chief Tate, because that was an initiative ordinance. It can't be changed except by going back to the voters. So here we are with on the annual schedule. So what I tried to help in my memo, I tried to help the board, guide the board through what's going on here. There are MOUs, the one new one, 3 that have been dropped, one that's been slightly revised, and the remainder have been changed. I was a little disappointed that we only got these a couple of weeks ago, and really was everything else is going on, was very good. We were very deep dive into the MOUs. On the other hand, they were approved just last year. So, and the one that is new, the timing period for that work has passed, so for that operation has passed, it was, if during the civil. And it makes sense for the other ones to be dropped, those, the reasoning for that makes sense. And then other than the SAR report, which is a second issue, you know, I didn't see anything that jumped out in the time that I had to review them. So we don't have a, well, we actually, we don't have a formal role baked into the ordinance, but the charter does list the review of all these agreements as one of the duties of the police department.
I think it's discretionary, not mandatory.
Yeah.
It's something we can do.
Right.
Yeah, not
Yes.
something we have to do.
Not a mandatory duty.
Right.
You're right.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything more?
No.
Sir,
Unless you want to move to the SAR, but I think we should do that separately.
what do you, well, do you have more you want to share?
Not about the MOUs, no.
Well, anything related to this item, but
So, I'm sorry.
to this item, do you have anything more?
Yes, so the item is, the suspicious activity reports are reports that are generated, and sent to the NICR. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what the stands for, but the Northern California, it's a fusion center. It gathers information about terrorist activity. And as part of the submission of MOUs, the police department also submits what are called suspicious activity reports, lists those reports that they have, reports on the reports they've sent to NICR. And those are on start on page 100 of the packet. And there were a few that caused a little concern, and policy 432 governs the sending of these sergeants. And I think that's in the supplement.
Yeah.
But actually, my whole note was in the supplemental, including the information on start.
Do you have a specific recommendation for us?
I would say, I would recommend that you know, approve the MOU as submitted, including the new one and the ones that are being brought. And suggest that the department provide some additional information on the SAR reports that I identified in the.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
I would not want to approve the MOUs. I don't think we need to. I have not myself had a chance to review them. And when this has come up before, we used to have a standing subcommittee on MOUs or something like that. But we just did not have the bandwidth or capacity to actually review the MOUs. So it got disbanded. I think we reviewed a couple. So I don't think we need to take any action at all. Happy to support the director's flagged issue, but beyond that, I don't see a need to approve the MOUs.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So we're not being asked to take a position one way or the other, right?
You're welcome to.
No,
Express, you're not, right, there's no motion, right? Yeah.
No, what I mean is.
No, we're not.
The board is not being asked to take a position on this by.
No,
No, nobody says the board.
Exactly.
I agree with everything Vice Chair Wilson said. That's just, those are my, that's my comment. Does anyone else have a comment on this item? Okay, I mean, I think that we don't need a motion, but I think that, Director, if you can reach out about your concerns and try to get more information, we would, you know, I think we would support that.
Okay.
But we don't need to approve the MOUs, so I think we're good on that. You know, I asked. Just for context, before we move on, for everyone, the department had not submitted their MOU compendium for like 8 years, 6 years. And there is a requirement in the ordinance that the deputy chief mentioned that basically says, if you don't submit the MOUs every year, they become void. Like it doesn't say that exactly, but that's the legal effect of what it says. So I was like, y'all have to submit your MOUs or else you're gonna be in a legally weird position here. And so there was a big effort last year, and so now we're sort of on the same track, on the same page about that. So that's the back. Okay, let's move on. Thank you for your memo, by the way, and the flags. Let's go to 9E, discussion action on PAB recommendations regarding the department's proposed budget for fiscal years 2027-2028. By Chair Wilson, they mentioned the meeting, so looking forward to hearing about that.
I did, and I don't have any recommended action for the PAB tonight. So in the packet, you just have the document that I sent to the city manager's office and the chief in advance of the meeting that was today. And I got some additional information. So I'll just highlight a few things that I think are interesting. So obviously the city is facing a very significant general fund deficit. And the city manager's office has prepared 2 different budgets, but the budget that the council is voting on is based on one of those assumptions or models that the city manager has developed. So one model assumes that a sales and use tax measure passes this November, and another model presents a reality that the measure does not pass. The council is going to be voting on a budget that reflects the assumption that the sales and use tax passes. So you can see in this set of questions that I asked that there are different scenarios for the number of reductions in BPD personnel based on whether or not that sales and use tax ballot measure is successful. Heretofore, almost the entire focus, I'd say the entire focus of the budget discussions has been on the cuts that will be needed, regardless of whether or not that ballot measure passes, rather than kind of digging in and to looking at the entirety of the budget overall. And so what I tried to do in this document is do that, sort of step back away from cuts and just look at the budget. So you can see some interesting things here, which were confirmed today for the most part, but I also got more information. So the first is that there's been a 38% increase in the general fund adopted BPD budget from fiscal year 2022 to fiscal year 2026. This 38%. I was told today that part of that is because the city took kind of a holiday of making its workers' comp contributions for a year and then went back to making those. In addition, there are labor agreements and other things that are causing that increase, but that's quite a significant increase over the course of 4 years. The other.
To say you stop paying the.
Yeah, so what I'm familiar with, just from having worked in government for a long time, is you can make deferrals on your pension obligation payment. Particularly if you're funded at, at a sufficient level, like through calendars, you can take a year off of making your contribution. I didn't know you could do that for workers' comp. I also didn't know how significant a budget line item workers' comp was for the city, apparently to contribute significantly to this swing in funding, but that's what I was told today. So I didn't get much detail on it, but that accounted for 5 million of that growth from 73 million to 103 to 101. About 5 million of that is bringing back in the workers' comp contributions. So that I think was interesting. Another thing I wanted to focus on is staffing trends. So there's a table that's included in your packet. And what I want to highlight that I got really clear about today is this. And maybe I should pull up instead of the packet my notes from today. I just don't wanna waste your time. I don't wanna waste your time, so I'm not gonna do that, but I think I'm gonna get a few things wrong. So one of the things I was struggling with is that, there were 302 authorized FTE for the department as of budget year 2026. And in budget year 27, it's dropping down to 272, and I wasn't understanding that math because under the sales and use tax scenario that that the budget is predicated on, the department is not realizing that significant of a reduction in authorized FTE. What I learned today is that even though 302 FTE were authorized for 2026, some lesser amount, I believe, 290 were actually funded. So there's a difference between what you might see in the adopted budget versus what was actually funded. What I have to say is really problematic for, let alone being on the board, but for the public, like trying to understand how the city budgeting works. It's completely Byzantine and there's no transparency. So I just get this information today in a meeting. The adopted budget says 302 positions, but today it's only 290 are funded. Then you can see the actual sworn officers, 151 to 154. I looked at the annual reports for this. I got about 150 in 2022. Really important thing that I learned today is that the budget that's going forward to council provides full funding for 164 sworn officers. When I asked how long it's been since we've had 164 sworn officers, I was told that it's been at least 8 years. So under this reduction, that is really being touted as a reduction, very severe cuts, but the department and other entities are realizing the department is being fully funded for more officers than it has been able to have in at least 8 years. So I think that's really important, and I want folks to just sit with that. I haven't done the analysis on dispatch yet. But what you'll see in the calls for service trends in the next table is that total calls for service being dispatched are going down. What is going up are the 911 calls received. And so I do think that there's support for dispatch positions. And I'm not sure, I haven't been able to do the analysis of what's recommended, but my preliminary gut feeling is that we may recommend bringing back additional dispatch positions and maybe in lieu of some of the sworn officer positions that are being funded. I also provided in this document the crime trends. This is data that I just pulled from annual reports, but you can see that crime is trending down. We'd have to look at 2026 data, 25 data, 26 data to continue this analysis, but nothing suggests that we're going up in major categories other than I think shootings. There have been 2 this year so far. So you begin to have a picture of declining call dispatch, declining crime, a budget that fully funds more sworn officers than have been on staff for over 8 years. And it's a bit confusing. Then I would say, I asked about EIS. EIS funding is not included in the budget because the initial funding, 200,000 for it, has already been allocated. And they don't know what they're gonna do with it come December. So there's no funding in the budget to support continuing on with this product that's currently being piloted. I think that's an issue. I also asked about the SCU. For those of you that were in the weeds on this, part of the fair and impartial policing effort was this reimagining of how lower level calls for service, particularly involving folks with mental health issues, would be handled. The city stood up the specialized care unit. The idea was it was going to handle on its own certain low level calls for service. For various reasons, it never really got off the ground. It was disbanded about a year ago. And what I had understood is the city was contracting with Alameda County to provide that service. When I asked about it today, I learned there is no contract. The city's not provided any funding to the county for it. And when I asked, well, what about the plan that was really kind of front and center with council for the city for several years there?
Yeah.
To reassess how lower level calls for service are handled, particularly those involving mental health. I was told, well, we're not gonna be able to move forward with that, particularly because in addition to what you're seeing in terms of the policing budget and what we've discussed on SCU, the entire Berkeley mental health mobile crisis unit is defunded in this budget. So the mobile crisis unit will no longer be available to do any co-response even.
Which department is that under?
I think it's health, maybe, no.
Yeah.
And so then I raised this point again about the 164 officers. We haven't had that many positions filled in that, over 8 years. Did you guys think about this with the city manager, assistant city manager? Reallocating a couple of those positions, going to bring them back over to the mobile crisis unit so that we could have the ability to continue to explore lower level response or level 1 calls for service. No. So that was very interesting. And that was my meeting today. So I don't have anything to recommend to you. I will have to at our next board meeting, I think, or I'm too late. I can't remember when this is going to council.
I kind of, that they're actually hearing it again in July. I don't know why. There's more budget consideration in July. Do you know that?
I think it's been.
No, I wasn't aware.
Yeah, I think it's going June 30th, actually. I think that's
the budget.
Yeah.
Budget starts July 1st.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to the deputy chief about the SCU mobile, and she was saying that there was something about it in July, so I don't know why.
Oh, maybe that, I don't know.
I don't know. So, yeah, so we
So
can't.
last year, what you have in your packet is what we submitted last year. You have the city gate report and all of its recommendations. You have a summary of our recommendations, which included developing metrics. I should say that as well. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I did learn that a couple of metrics have been identified by the department. They went forward to council, I think, in mid-May. They're not the kind of metrics that could drive budget decisions as far as I can see, which was our recommendation. Like, what are we trying to achieve, and let's fund that. But some metrics have been presented to council for the police department. And the last thing I would say that I think is very positive is the chief did mention that they are going to do a new cost benefit analysis of whether or not we should continue to have our own jail versus just using Santa Rita. One of the things that the city gate report recommended is that we not have sworn officers do the transport to Santa Rita, but instead have community service officers do that, which is much lower level cost. And so that should be factored into that updated analysis. I think probably closing our jail, we will find makes good fiscal sense. So, yeah.
Any comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And that the mental health mobile crisis team is not part of the PPD budget. However, it's just basically going back on my 30-year-old knowledge of that. It really does seem to be an integral part of how the work got done effectively. And my impression from the one little right on there, that compared to the minute they did a long time ago, was that mental health issues are a bigger portion of the workload than they were 30 years ago. It's just my impression. I'd love to see that validated somehow or disputed. Whatever. So it seems that seems to me like a big deal. Is nobody bracing that?
I don't know. This is what I kind of brought up when I mentioned this about the stop data and racial disparities. One of my frustrations is this was a huge initiative hundreds of thousands of dollars were spent on
It
studies.
was millions.
Well, just the studies to develop the recommendation for this tiered response to lower level calls for service, then millions was spent to stand up the pilot SCU. And then it goes away and there's no attention paid to it at all by council. And I don't understand it. It's the same with the disparities in the stop data. This was supposed to be something that the city really cared about. So we really care about it, then let's pay attention to it and do so, have some accountability. But it just fades away into the ether. So I'm happy to, even just as the vice chair, then you guys haven't had time to digest it, send a brief letter to some council members saying, hey, this budget funds 164 sworn officers. They haven't had that many staff in this many years. We hear you're completely disbanding the mobile crisis unit. You might think about reallocating a few positions.
I mean, I'm not even weighing in at where the money should come from. That's a can of worms, I have no idea. But what I do know that was kind of a real point of pride for the city.
Yeah.
For
But
decades.
apparently
And so.
something happened a few years ago. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead. And no, and so I would be deeply curious as to what the reaction within the department is to that, because they're the ones most directly impacted by that, because it's a change in the way policies going around books. It's been going on for a long time. It's a change. It's a change. I'm just curious as to what they think about that change. I just don't know. Anybody?
Yeah, what I heard today, what I was gonna say is apparently a few years ago, the mobile crisis folks stopped being willing to go out on calls on their own. Maybe you can weigh in on this. And I got the impression that it's been perceived as less helpful since that time. Something happened. I think one of them got hurt. So there's a desire for co-response all the time. Then maybe there's a perception that it's less helpful, because that certainly was not the SCU model. The SCU was supposed to be independent response, which you could see would be very helpful. I don't know if you have anything to add about that.
Thinking from my own personal feedback, yes, many years ago, one of the mobile crisis orders by the assaulted by the citizen. I don't know if it really, I don't know if there was a huge change for, historically, they would go to calls alone with known subjects that they dealt with, that they comfortable with. Anything unknown or new, we would always do it with them. I don't know what they do without us, so I don't know if that's actually changed. I haven't seen that change. And then we request them for calls as well, when we go on scene and decide this might be better suited to they, to help us out there. I'm a big fan of mobile crisis. I've worked with them for my whole career, the gals over there, and they've been amazing. Personal thing, SCU was not anywhere near on par. They were supposed to help eliminate us. They created more work and usually asked us to do things that they were supposed to do and things like that, and it just, in my opinion, was not inefficient at all. So.
Is it appropriate to ask thoughts on the elimination of the?
Not a fan, but again, I appreciate your comment. It's not, I'm not feeling strong on where the money should come from, but I do think, right, a lot to do the officers in the street.
Thank you. Other comments from, yeah, go ahead.
Doesn't the fire department get stuck with this now?
No,
No, I mean, you're there first and
Yeah.
then they're there. The reason I ask is that I've worked with a group called Families Advocating for the Severely Mentally Ill. And there are a couple of people in Berkeley who have children, well, adults now.
well,
And when they get in trouble, they call the police Well, they call the fire department, but the police come first and then the fire department comes.
Fire doesn't assist at all pretty much, when it comes to. Mentally ill, so they're so good, but if there is a need, if they are placed on a 5150 WNI hold.
Yeah,
We contract with, Royal Ambulance, they deal with not BMD. So I don't foresee there being any change in that could be BMD, could be wrong, but, it's more impact on BMD in my opinion, but not an asset and a tool. Everybody, of assistance that, I mean, granted, we deal with many calls with, mobile crisis, time of day, things like that, all training in those aspects, but I think it's a very common field for certain situations.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, any other? Honestly, okay, so I think about reducing the 164 number is that I talked to the chief about it, and my understanding is that that will help with the overtime costs as well. That was sort of like, I don't know if that's backed up by any sort of like, I don't know how that math
Like,
works out, but
If they've actually hired that many people, but they've been authorized to hire many more than that all these years and they haven't been able to. So
Right.
I'm just saying there's a reality check component of it.
sure.
If you haven't been able to do it in 8 years, why would you imagine you're gonna do it now? And the crime data trends are going down, so it's not,
Yeah, I mean, there's a question about augmentation with all the tools that they're being able to have and you know, as well, right?
and I also asked, I don't have any visibility into what the overtime budget is. Or how, even the overtime budget included in the fiscal year 2027 budget. Because I haven't seen any line item budget for the department. Which has made this extremely difficult.
So I mean, I would be in favor of staying narrow with our response so that we can prop up that discussion that you're saying is missing. I agree with you. I was very surprised from the deputy chief to hear that that was going away because it's been a really important part of public safety in Berkeley, and also like, you know, just being attentive to the needs of our city, like what you're saying, I agree with you. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the work that our officers do is like akin to social work in some ways, right? Like visiting and, you know, like there, and that is also a skill set that officers can cultivate, but there's like having those like trained mental health professionals there alongside is like really important. So, I mean, if we, I would be in favor of authorizing a very concrete recommendation around funding that. I also personally like to put a couple other things into that. I think the EIS thing, it makes no sense why they would not fund it now because the pilot has not even like launched yet, like it's about to launch. And so to end that, it's just another example of bad, you know, fiscal planning where you're gonna end programs that have not even been borne out, really. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. And then the third thing is, did you hear at all about whether the Live Free gun violence intervention program will be funded? Did you know?
No, I do not.
Do you know about that?
Not aware of it.
Okay. I heard that that's also on the budget chopping block, and I would be in favor of keeping that active. I think that y'all do great work with that, honestly, and so like I would really want that to be included in our recommendation. I think that tied to that should be observations that are in here, right? Like you make observations. I don't know, there shouldn't be a conclusion about where, but like observations I think that are supported by this data that you explain are really helpful. I'm okay not having a recommendation tied to where money should come from, but having like a section on recommendations and a separate section on observations would make sense to me. So that's where I think I'd be okay landing. Does anyone? I feel like we need to come around and measure. We are up against like the budget timeline, which is next meeting. I would be in favor of, well, I'm just gonna make a motion for the sake of moving things along to designate the vice chair to write a letter expressing the board's support for the mobile crisis unit and the EIS program continuation, which is a very small subset of costs, and then also the Live Free program, which is a gun violence intervention program that the department does, and they do great work with that. And in addition to a separate subsection on the sort of like overall trends analysis without tying that to any conclusion. That's my motion.
Second.
Give it a friendly amendment? Or, okay, let's vote. Let's vote.
All right. Board Member Nash?
Yes.
Board Member Allen?
Yes.
Board Member Clinton?
Yep.
Vice Chair Wilson?
Yes.
And Chair Capano?
Yes.
Next, motion carries.
Thanks, everyone. Let's keep going, unless, no, we have one more item. Let's keep going. Okay, we're gonna go to 9F, I believe, which is the discussion action on BPD's annual police equipment report. Director, over to you.
Okay, you had submitted in supplemental sort of an overview, so I don't know if you want to start with that. Or just assume everybody's read it.
I'm okay not going over it.
Okay.
I would just direct people's attention to it. It is, yeah, I can mention it when I have my final comments, but
Okay.
but yeah, you go ahead.
All right, so, this is another sort of hefty item that comes to us the same time as a bunch of other items from the department. There's not a lot of lead time. And this was introduced at the last meeting, and I want to point out, I sent an email, the memo that you saw, actually, last meeting is on page 158. And it's actually, the date is June 1st, 2012, so my current memo is June 12th. At the last meeting, board members identified some shortcomings of the annual police report. And staff also identified something that was missing. And those have been incorporated into a revised report, which is in your packet. And this is I should go back one step and tell you what the annual equipment report is about. So the city had actually passed an ordinance requiring reporting on inventory and employment and costs of various pieces of the equipment. And there's also a state law, 8481, that did something very similar. And so, I don't know, was it a couple of years or 3 that these two, the state law and the state law which imposes requirement on local agencies. So for a time, both the state and the local ordinance imposed this reporting requirement on the department, which were similar but not exactly identical. And it was really an administrative burden for the department. So earlier this year, the local ordinance was overhauled so that it incorporates the requirements of state law, and then adds some of its own requirements. And so the report is designed to fulfill those requirements. We'll say that almost all of the board's comments as well as staff's comments were incorporated into the revised report. We do have concerns raised by members of the public, and we've gotten an email, we passed out our copies tonight of continuing concerns, and actually one of them is actually mentioned in this. I found very cool. So the board should decide what action it wants to take.
Thanks, Director.
Mhm.
Thanks for your memo. Just to point all of your attention to my supplemental, just really quickly. It is in the smaller packet right here. It's not in the main packet. I think this one right here. It is a brief letter to council that will accompany a recommendation if we approve it tonight, that basically frames our recommendation with the purpose of the police equipment report, because for context, the council was actually poised to eliminate the local controlled equipment report entirely. And, you know, in the board's opinion at the time, kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater of all the local strengths. The council preserved a lot of the local reporting requirements. At the same time, it took our recommendation to preserve the local reporting requirements and also to consolidate the report. So essentially, that's a narrative that would precede an approval. I do approve of, you know, I would recommend approval of the police equipment report and inserting that into the second page of the, or the third page, excuse me, of the letter, that where it says insert conclusion based on board discussion. We would just say something like the board recommends approval of the police equipment report. That's my submission.
Do you have a response to John Lindsay Coleman's comments?
I did.
One of them is like the total annual cost is not accurately depicted, and the other is about this, I don't even know how to say it, 50 caliber rifle.
Yeah, so I think that we should ask the department next year to try to address the total annual cost. There's a lot of like, you know, synthesizing that would be required at this stage. And I think the report can get better year over year. And so that's sort of like where I would intend to get at that flag.
Okay, I thought it was a good flag. Can we put this in your letter?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, do you want to are you okay with it as a footnote, or?
Just like recommendation for next year's report.
Okay, we can add it as a second line.
Yeah.
So I'd be okay with that.
Do you have any particular feeling about this rifle? Or does anybody else have the point?
Shooting down the helicopter.
I would suggest that we defer this as a board and someone as a board can consider it, having a separate recommendation, separate and apart from this. I mean, it doesn't have to be tied to the police equipment. We can consider it separately, at a different meeting. I don't think anyone has looked into it. That's my recommendation. I mean, yeah, if the department's not using certain things, I think I can see policy reasons why we might not want them to have it. If it's, but I just don't even have a recommendation at this stage.
Okay, I don't. So I'm gonna make a motion that we approve your letter as amended to reflect the first issue. In John Lindsay Coleman's public comment, which is about accurately reflecting the total annual cost for each type of military equipment to include personnel time, the cost of personnel time spent on training. And then otherwise we approve the report and your letter. That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Okay. Excuse me. All right, board member Nash,
Yes.
board member Allen,
Yes.
board member Conklin. Yes. Vice Chair Wilson.
Yeah.
And Chair Cayetano.
Yes.
All right,
Great.
motion carries.
Thank you, everyone, for this long, extended discussion. I really appreciate it. There are a lot of things that the board does, and all of them require a level of engagement that is incredible for volunteers. So I appreciate all of you. Okay, we're gonna go to now. Public comment. Yes.
Okay. We don't have any physically present speakers, so I'll move on to our virtual attendees. As a reminder, speakers are generally allotted up to 3 minutes, but may be allotted less time. If there are many speakers, they may comment on any matter within the board jurisdiction at this time. except confidential personnel matters. Chair, at this time, I see 3 hands raised. We'll start with the user named Kelly's iPad. Kelly, if you granted permission to speak, 3 minutes are on the screen.
Okay, Kelly Hammergren here. So a couple things. Live Free is funded for 2027, but not 2028. And then we don't know what the police department has planned for the 30th on the surveillance, because that is not posted yet. And what is posted is just the motion from the Public Safety Committee with nothing more. So there won't be anything available until after 5 p.m. tomorrow night. And I guess we all have to look then. And the investigative software that all of us, I shouldn't say all of us, but many of us citizens are uneasy about, as Arlo Melmberg described it at the Public Safety Committee to the police department. This is more than just gathering the information from the ALPRs, the fixed cameras, the drones, and private cameras that may be owned by someone. It also scrapes from the internet information that's available, and they're using AI to sort through it all. So that's what they stated at the meeting, which is AI makes mistakes. They're not perfect. It's not perfect. So in the environment that we're living in this country right now, it's just kind of uneasy to think about innocent people being scraped up from the internet and films with this surveillance. And then I heard that there were 154 police officers and 174 positions. And I understand from PAB member Wilson that 164 is going to be the number. It wasn't clear to me who you were communicating with about all of this. Looking through the transcript, and if you're able to share that, I'd appreciate it. If not, I understand if my comment is clear. Okay, I guess I don't need the other 33 seconds. Thank you very much.
Wait, Jose, can you pause really quick? Go ahead.
Here.
Yeah.
I was meeting with, I think he's the assistant city manager, Dave White, and the chief of police. Definitely, sorry.
Okay, our next speaker is Kit Saginor. Kit, you can grant permission to speak. 3 minutes are on the screen.
Thank you. This is Kit Saginor. I want to make 2 comments. One is that the idea that the owner of cameras can opt in does not in any way protect the civil rights. If my neighbor decides to opt in and put his camera online, then my comings and goings, I have no control over the fact that that's all recorded as well. And the idea that it's okay if businesses do it. I can't get groceries. I can't live, without food. So again, I won't have the option to not be recorded if businesses have cameras on. So that's, I think, a really important thing to understand about the idea that it can be optional. And the other point I want to make is about something that Ms. Hammergren just pointed to, is that the atmosphere we are living in now. I hear folks in positions of power in Berkeley talking as if what's happening in Washington, D.C. is never going to affect us. There's this sort of blithe disregard for the fact that there are a bunch of fascists who are increasingly disregarding of the laws that should govern them, and increasingly looking for ways that they can take over other things in the country. As you probably are, at least, or should be aware, now we have parents who patrol around the schools when the kids are coming and going to school, because we don't know that ICE won't show up tomorrow. We can all hope that ICE won't show up tomorrow. But whatever you put in place in Berkeley, it is vulnerable. to what's coming from Washington, D.C. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind and not think that we lived in some closed world where the decisions you make for what the Berkeley police do will only pertain to Berkeley and will only the equipment they have can only be seen by in Berkeley. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more speaker. Deb, you've been granted permission to speak. 3
Hi,
minutes from.
I'm personally really disappointed that the PAB, and first let me say I really appreciate all your work. Thank you. I'm really disappointed that you didn't decide to strongly push for no mass surveillance in Berkeley. Um, I'm I'm shocked. The idea, as other speakers said, that this won't be used in difficult ways, the fact that we're in Berkeley and we have a tradition of allowing people to protest, and the way that the mass surveillance is, I think, obviously going to undermine that and leave people really in danger for protesting. It's an obvious tool of an authoritarian government. Um, and why would we actually spend money in a deficit on this unpopular, expensive project that is obviously undermining people's privacy? It's shocking. And I'm hoping you can change your mind on that. Can you? The other comments that the other people made about voluntary, as if you're kind of talking as if, well, it's voluntary. Those people are giving up their camera data voluntarily, but not the people who are being photographed. Those people are not volunteering. And I hope that on the budget you push to take out the money for this unneeded, unpopular mass surveillance. It's a perfect opportunity. We have $30 million under. Why would we spend money, and why would you allow them, if you have any power against it, to spend needed money instead of a mental health crisis team and instead of all these other community projects, to use that on this deeply disturbing, deeply unpopular, awful, privacy invading mass surveillance? And also, if you would postpone, encourage them to postpone the RFP until the new council is voted in after November and after the new council members are put in, that would be an appropriate approach. So I don't know how much power you have over that, but please have them postpone that instead of trying to slip it in with the current council. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, with that, we have no additional hands raised.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. With that, we were going to go to closed session. So thank you, everyone, for attending. Agenda item 11.
Chair, we are back on the record.
Thank you, everyone. We approve staff's recommendation in one case. And with that, we'll go to agenda item 13, adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you.